Thank you for joining me today. Well, hopefully we're all sitting comfortably. I'm not too hungry before lunch. I'll try and keep it to time so you can rush out and get some carbs in. With that in mind, I will try and crack on, and I'll start with a story. Imagine receiving an urgent video call from your CEO. You recognize their voice, their face, their mannerisms, every detail seems perfect. They ask you to authorize a high-value transaction immediately. Usually, you'd kind of be skeptical of any requests for this kind of thing, but you've seen in your head, it's them, obviously. Yeah. So you make the arrangements, and oh no, minutes later, millions vanish. You've just witnessed a deepfake AI robbery. It's a real scenario that cost one firm $25 million in 2024. I was going to say last year, but we're in 2026. Keep making that mistake. So this isn't the future, this is actually now. That film was a film called Arup. It happened in Hong Kong in 2024. 200 million Hong Kong dollars gone, which is 25 million US dollars. And this poor soul isn't the only kind of person this deception's happened to. It's one of the ones that just made it to the news because it's quite a big one, and it's happening everywhere. Increasingly often, and it's a real problem for us. It's a new kind of problem, really, and one we've not really seen before. See, my entire thesis on this is our entire kind of perception of reality is under threat. You know, what we see and hear, which is kind of the bastions of what we thought were reality, no longer necessarily the truth. We're struggling to adapt to this new technological landscape. So welcome to the great brain robbery, from clickbait to con men, navigating the dark future of online manipulation. Quite a long title. Before we go too far down the rabbit hole, because this is kind of a rabbit hole, I should introduce myself. I'm Jeff Watkins. I'm a CTO, Chief AI Officer as well, another fancy CXO term, and AI consultant. In my spare time, I do quite a lot of research into things like misinformation, deepfakes, and also things like the anthropomorphization of AI. And you might say, well, that's easy for you to say. Well, it wasn't. I just spent a 6-month period doing research on anthropomorphization, and the first 3 months was learning to say anthropomorphization. And also, I would be remiss if I didn't shill my podcast, Compromising Positions. It's been going for a couple of years now, multiple award-winning. It covers cybersecurity, AI, and behavioral science and other topics. And we've just launched a new season. If you're going to search for it, it's on YouTube and all the other places. Search for Compromising Positions podcast. Don't just search for Compromising Positions. I mean, certainly not on a work laptop. So as I mentioned before, I introduced myself. I'm going to present to you today the great brain robbery. And I think it's the greatest heist of all time. Obviously, this talk is named after another great heist, what we know as the great train robbery, which is a robbery of £2.6 million, about 69 million in today's currency, from a Royal Mail train travelling from Glasgow to London in 1963 in Buckinghamshire. After tampering with the line-side signals, they brought the train to the halt. A gang of 15 people attacked the train with careful planning based on insider information from an individual known as the Ulsterman, who was never found. They managed to get in there, steal all that money, and the bulk of that money has never actually been recovered. They used a combination of techniques not far away from our digital heists, how they operate today, to get what they want. History lesson aside, because I'm sure you're not here for the history. I could bang on about cybersecurity policies and how we govern AI or lack thereof, but I think I like to talk to be a bit more personal and talk about how all this will affect us up here, up here in the brain here. We have one mind, and we don't want to waste it, have it kind of turn to things that aren't true. So what happened in the opening story? Well, it was just another type of heist, and it goes through some key stages. Firstly, the people get organized. Serious organised crime is going on here, and we'll cover that next. Secondly, they found their target, not just the organisation, but human beings, individuals, an employee in this case. Then they employed some of the tools of the trade. The attack used psychological tricks, urgency, authority, stuff that makes you bypass common sense if you're not very careful. Then they brought in some heavy machinery, AI, to superpower their attack. And then the kind of cracks in the vault of reality started to show. Nothing was what it seemed. And the call was not with the execs. It was despite being really convincing. So they made off with the loot in this case. So I want to say, get organised. how big of a problem is this, do we think? I mean, we can't really see cyber criminals. You know, we can see a bunch of people running away from a train robbery. In fact, the catch and conviction rate for cyber criminals is incredibly low, especially the types of criminality we're talking about here. In fact, 42% of all cybercrime convictions in the UK are actually people who are in the police force, not necessarily policemen or women, but people in the police force using the police database for things they shouldn't be doing, and that's a very serious breach and there's a criminal conviction. The actual conviction for cybercrime is less than 1%, with some people claiming it's 0.05%, so it's very, very low. So it's actually hard to pin down individuals because it's online, and it's usually a bit late by that point, but we can at least talk about the scale of it all. So the overall cost for cybercrime, which was projected a while ago, it's a lot. This is a smallish screen, so here we have some of the rich people in the world here, and that's in billions, and the other on the left is in trillions, 10.5. Don't you think Bill Gates looks really sad there because he's lost at being the sort of the top billionaire? I feel kind of sorry for him. Anyway, cybercrime is one of the greatest transfers of wealth in human history, and sources claim it's only going to get much larger. Currently, the claim is that it's the third largest economy behind the US and China, with some sources reckoning it could get to many tens of trillions within a few years, meaning if it was a country, at some point it might actually have the largest economy in the history of the world. At least what some of the sources are saying, and I got caught by this last time I did this presentation and used these numbers in good faith. The sources for this 10.5 trillion are quite dubious. They all point back to one site that seems to have been making up for the gram or something. But the actual figure is really high. It's probably a few trillion. But you'll see this figure everywhere. Anyway, it is a huge amount of money, irrespective. And that means cybercrime is an incredibly lucrative business. Yet, while the security industry quite often still targets things like trying to stay one step ahead of the criminals when they look at technical controls and intrusion software, it often overlooks the very human element of cybercrime. And it's time to change that by thinking about how we protect ourselves. Now, for every crime, there's a criminal and usually a victim, unless you're committing a victimless crime like putting pineapple on pizza. Apologies if that triggers any pizza purists. Although in each country, there'll be criminals committing cybercrimes to other people in that country. Most cybercrime originates from another country. So there's a first of its kind report that was published about a year and a bit ago called a journal called PLOS ONE, and it showed a relatively small number of countries house the greatest cybercriminal threats. Now, guess who is number one when it comes to cybercrime? I'll take guesses from the floor. What? Any other guesses? Got it. No surprises, really. It's Russia. Other good guesses, though. How about the next one? I was surprised. It's the Ukraine. China's next after that. Then the USA. Also surprising. Then we've got a couple of other ones that you'd maybe expect to see. Guess who number 8 is? Yeah, this really surprised me. I mean, it's nowhere near in the scale of Russia. I mean, then again, we're a much smaller country. I'd say we actually punch above our weight for criminality, given how big Russia is. But there's also a different set of demographics, types of cybercrime. There's common organ ransomware, profit that comes from Russia, Nigeria, and things like that, just kind of organized crime. Then there's disruption of critical national infrastructure and destabilization. That also comes from Russia, just from the state, North Korea, Iran, and other unfriendly nations. And then there's the secrets in intellectual property theft, and that mainly originates from China. Now, but we don't need to worry too much about the attribution of attacks because that's largely academic. Now we understand kind of the scale of the situation and who the threat actors are. We need to understand a little bit why it's a problem for us, the humans, rather than technology. So if you'd asked about the biggest cyber attack threat space a few years ago, most people would have mentioned something technical. But times are changing, and as threat detection and other protective software is actually getting better, these kind of ideas of like digital lockpicking, finding ways in systems is actually getting harder. So that means that they need to think of something else. And the thing that hasn't got harder to attack really is us. Which is weird, really, because, I mean, hands up here, who's done a cybersecurity awareness program? If not all the hands go up, I'm kind of scared when there's like some people like, no, don't. What's this? Right, okay, I'll gloss over that. Now, You could also argue that many people targeting people who aren't IT professionals, but it shows that even people in IT and in cybersecurity are just as vulnerable. In fact, they found that cybersecurity people have got some of the worst IT practices in some surveys, which is kind of scary. And also the proportion of cyber attacks against a human is demonstrably growing. It's up to about 80% of all cyber attacks globally, up from about 70% pre-pandemic. It is growing. And a great understanding for why, think about why cybercrime is such a problem for us humans to deal with, is think about how intangible it is. It's precious data hidden behind a screen instead of a door. You remember to look, hopefully remember to lock your door before you go out, depending on what country you live in. We humans aren't great with abstract concepts like cybersecurity. Unless a house is visible with windows and doors, we can see who might be. We can see people looking into our windows. We can't see who might be watching us online. It's tough for most people to picture a digital attacker lurking behind the ones and the zeros. And to those outside of security, online threats can feel like they're just floating in the ether, but they have very real consequences. And this is one factor that makes us great targets. So who here, straw poll, who here has social media? Less than I think every time I do this, it's less and less. Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. LinkedIn's social media. Well, bad news, and obviously a lot of these can be used for OSINT, open source intelligence, alongside dark web sources and from other breaches and things like that. Of course, for many less tech-savvy people, they don't even realize they're leaking this critical information. And I think one of the key problems is the state of cognitive overload in our hyper-connected new world we live in. The average person has to make around 35,000 decisions a day. That's a lot. Now, some of those decisions are pretty trivial, like, do I want sugar in my coffee? Do I switch the channel on the television? But it's 35,000 nonetheless. In this mental state, with all these decisions we make, we try to skip checks and we take shortcuts, because that's great news for attackers. We're simply not wired for 24/7 vigilance, and attackers know that, and they wait for the moment we click before we think. Remember, up until 30 years ago, we weren't used to anything beyond mass media, like the news and the newspapers. We haven't evolved physiologically, neurologically, or societally quickly enough to keep up with the web, and especially artificial intelligence. Another thing is we're always online, meaning we're always vulnerable. We don't I remember dialing up to connect to the internet, and you do that for maybe an hour, and then you'd be disconnected. Not anymore. Our digital footprints are massive. Phones, smartwatches, laptops, home assistants, social apps, smart fridges for some reason. The attack surface sprawl means attackers don't have to hack a firewall, they can just text you. Personal devices are one of the biggest pathways into corporate systems. So that's personal devices like BYOD, people's phones, WhatsApp, etc. It also means that there's a huge amount of OSINT available on most people. There's the blurring of professional and personal boundaries. Thanks to the shift to hybrid work, it's turned bedrooms into boardrooms in some cases. Social media people share, people hashtag first day at work can leak really important information. Things like org charts, project names, ID badges that people put online. I've seen people picking pictures like, oh, look at my new card, and it had the card number. Like, why are you doing that? Immediately have to cancel that card. Attackers use this to craft highly personalized scams, such as things like pretexting and spear phishing. We're also creatures of habit, repetition, and routine. That means there's exploitable patterns. Predictable habits make us very easy to socially engineer. We check email first thing in the morning. That's a great time for an urgent phish. We reuse passwords, same 2 or 3 recovery questions. Thankfully, they're going the way of the dinosaur now. Routines give attackers rhythms to match their traps to. So we're creatures of habit, but attackers are creatures of observation. And sadly, despite all the breaches that happen, increasingly often there's still a low awareness of the threat landscape in general. Many people still kind of equate cybercrime with hackers in hoodies, not LinkedIn messages or fake invoice emails. Employees may not even know what a deepfake voice call or a QR phishing scam is. Security training, unfortunately, is often like compliance theatre. It's a tick box exercise. You have done your... so of all the people who did their security awareness training, how much behaviour actually changed from their security awareness change from that training? I'm not going to ask you to put your hands up. I don't want you to lie. And fundamentally, most people still see cybersecurity as somebody else's problem, something to be avoided, something abstract. Even if people are aware, the security fatigue, and it won't happen to me syndrome with this always-on lifestyle. Being constantly vigilant and constant pings and warnings can desensitize you to it. People ignore security pop-ups. I'm sure we've all done this. Updates, I don't want to update. This Mac needs updating. I haven't done it because I'm on stage and I'll put it off and I'll forget it for a month or so. Am I leaving a vulnerability there? And there's still a sense among most people is that I'm not important enough to be targeted. And the other thing is we often discourage people from reporting problems or getting help by stigmatizing them. For example, calling people stupid, idiots, dumb, or the weakest link. I think that's a really interesting one, the weakest link. And we're just as harsh to our peers as well when they experience a breach. So why should we care, really? Because people are losing their jobs over some of these incidents. And bullying people after the fact of this kind of thing is kind of kicking somebody when they're already down. And it could happen to any one of us. I unfortunately don't know what happened to the person who was duped in that opening story into handing over $25 million worth of money. I hope they kept their job, but I imagine their next performance review is probably going to be pretty harsh, to be honest with you. Despite endless security awareness campaigns, we just keep falling for things. And I think there's a few reasons for this. One of the things is to wrap our head around is actually humans are odd animals. We can be made aware of things that, but awareness doesn't always equal behavioral change. In fact, it often doesn't, unless there's a very strong incentive to do so. Lots of people know that smoking's bad for your health, eating ultra-processed food, or even using MySQL. None of those are good for you, but we do them anyway because habits, unfortunately, die hard and they're incredibly to break. It requires time, dedication, and a serious amount of willpower to change deeply ingrained habits in people. We need some kind of compelling reason or incentive. And just importantly, we need a strong support system around us, whether that's friends, colleagues, or a culture that encourages to make positive change. And without these elements, then even the best intentions quite often fall flat, I'm afraid. So we're fallible because we're predictable and difficult to persuade when it comes to good practices versus bad habits, especially when the good habits are harder. But there's a number of things that aren't really our fault. The deceptions. These are things that catch what is termed in the sort of UK law as a fool in a hurry, or a less savvy user, or even seasoned cybersecurity people, really. So now we come to things like assaults on our mind, the psychological tricks, the why where the biggest attack surface there is. Because you can't easily program software to avoid these kinds of attack against us. And when it comes to attacks against people, two main things are happening usually. The first we've covered around the fact that awareness doesn't necessarily lead to behavioral change, as we'd expect. And the second is the concept of the amygdala hack, the amygdala hijack. What is the amygdala? It's the part of the brain that handles our emotional regulation. The amygdala hijack happens when an attacker uses your emotional responses against you by creating fear, urgency, feeling of authority above you. They can effectively shut down higher reasoning, causing you to do something that you wouldn't usually do when your brain was in a fully functioning state. And this shutdown happens due to creating variability in breathing and heart rate. There's a great talk by a professor, I think it's Ian Watkins, no relation, on this topic about functioning and heart rate. I'm sure we've all been, hands up here, have you all been under stress and then you've been asked to say something and you've just come up with utter garbage? Yeah, it happens. And then that's due to breathing and heart rate regulation because the fear response. Your amygdala is shut down, the brain has gone on holiday, the lizard brain has taken over. So the antidote to this really is easy, but also hard at the same time, is to recognize when it's happening, take a step back and slow the hell down, which is really, really hard in a fast-paced world. And learning some of these tricks, though, can actually help us understand how these attacks work and maybe help us reason about them. So I'm going to go over a couple of them now. I can't go over all of them. I don't have time. Probably the most common one is urgency and fear, as we just discussed. So how does it work? Well, it's a play on your fear of loss and urges you to act before you come to your senses. A good example is your account has been suspended, click here to restore access. Or somebody's logged into your banking account, please log in to change your password. Oh my God, I better do that quickly. Reasoning hijacked. And it works because that fear short circuits your rational thinking. You act before you actually think. I've almost done it recently. Real world examples include phishing emails pretending from banks or tax authorities. Here's a good example, someone added blah blah as a recovery email. Let's just go in there. Oh no, you got to log in. The next one is also pretty common because most of us work in sort of organisations is authority. This is the opening scam really. Impersonates somebody important to your organisation, like the CEO, an IT admin, or a government agency as well. HM Revenue and Excise, the scam is a big one. A real-world example is the business email compromise that spoofed the CEO. I'm sure you've seen these before, something like this. Have anybody had these kind of emails or WhatsApps? I'm in the office today, or I'm in a meeting. Can you please make this transfer? It's really important. Has anybody had one of these? I used to get loads of these. And they're pretty effective. Another one is reciprocity. And that's a big word. It works on the principle of give a little, get a little in return, or take a lot. So, here's a PDF report now. Give me your login details to access the rest. This works because actually us humans are quite wired to repay favors, even if it's just a freebie or something you don't actually want in the first place. Real world examples do include things like malicious downloads or fake gated content. Ones that often send you to like a fake Microsoft or Google sign-in page to steal your credentials. I've been looking for a role and there's like, oh yeah, the documents for this role are here. They're on a Google Drive and there's like, this Google Drive login looks funny and I'm already logged into Google. It's like, almost got me there. The next one is similar to fear and urgency, but it's scarcity. It plays on sort of our need to acquire things rather than loss. And it's kind of also like fear of missing out. We've seen this before. There's only 10 spots left for this crypto investment. Act now. I think this is one. We had a lot of these during COVID-19. This works because scarcity does trigger something inside of us that enforces irrational decision making. You don't want to miss out on this amazing investment opportunity or whatever, and it'll never be available again, clearly. There's a lot of things like fake investment platforms, romance scams, NFT phishing. And the next one is social proof. A lot of this plays on our conformist nature. We like to conform in groups. Join thousands of others already using this tool. Your friends shared this document with you. And this works because we trust what others appear to trust, especially friends and colleagues, and it's like a magic shortcut for skepticism. Real-world examples are compromised accounts sending malicious links, and have we had these on things like Facebook before in the past? Your friend sends you a link, you go, that's interesting link that you've sent me there. Or these social quizzes that my people on my connections kept answering, like basically, give me the answers to your security banking questions, all of them. Because they look innocent enough at first. It's a free quiz. Yeah. The final one is curiosity, which, as I usually say, killed the cat. The victim will get something like, check out this leaked video. It's sensational. Confidential salary spreadsheet. Something salacious or tempting. This works because us humans, we really need to know secrets or get access to things maybe we shouldn't. Many not even know about cybersecurity, may not know there's any harm in it. Real-world examples include clickbaited titles, but also USB drop attacks. Somebody who has a USB stick in the car park, you pick it up and go, I wonder what's on this USB stick. That's another really good source of attack for it to get away into organizations. And I'm sure you found many in the past. Actually, a lot of these scams combine these techniques and tactics to get an even stronger response. So far, so good. So we've got the criminals, the target, and the tools of the trade. And just like the train robbers of old, but conning billions of people, that's a really big job to pull off. So why not bring in some heavy machinery? Because a lot of this, up until recently, was done by very crude automation or by actual humans. And AI is definitely the machinery that the crooks need. And this is where I think this is a really increasing problem. The advent of generative AI has democratized access to AI services for all of us. And it's changed the world, and I love it. But whatever we have is also available to cybercriminals. And they are definitely leveraging it. So when generative AI became publicly available, there was a rapid spike in phishing attacks. This McKinsey report suggested a 138% increase in attacks. I've heard other figures over over time as it's gone forward, because that goes to 2023, to be 800%. Because unlike you in the crowd, I hope you know you have policies, AI policies and IT policies, and you have rules and you have codes of conduct. Criminals have none of that. They don't have a project to deliver. They have a target. They have a mission to complete. They're not limited by process, and they know there's no chance of getting caught at all, less than 1%. And they had some automation, things like that before. It was a bit more expensive, but thanks to the democratization of AI, it's really cheap now. This is a dangerous time, as Gen AI is actually allowing for mass production of content, such as automated phishing email generation, the kind of content that we've never seen before, that's unique, tailored, and really sophisticated. Also at a price point that was never possible before. Going from needing lots of expensive equipment or human effort to being entirely automated on SaaS platforms or even just on a laptop. But LLMs are also helping people sound more credible. Tools like ChatGPT, used maliciously, can write convincing emails in no time at all, in multiple languages with perfect grammar. Maybe not like this one. There are much more convincing these much more convincing phishing attacks actually get around a lot of existing spam filters. This is a big problem with spam filters when they came out. And they're much less likely to be spotted by human beings as well, so it's a double whammy. And to add to that, it's been found that attackers even use A/B testing. So they're using like product techniques on messages to figure out which ones get the most clicks, which is crazy. And they're also using things like analytics and AI to monitor and look at review their own tactics. They're actually quite a sophisticated bunch nowadays. And if they weren't crooks, you'd probably love to hire some of them. AI is also personalizing attacks like nothing ever before. People are having a relationship with AI. They're having online weddings with replica personas. I don't know if people have seen this. It blows my mind. And these kind of services can be used for nefarious purposes. And when I say relationships, people are incredulous, but because AI actually really does sound like AI, right? Lots of emojis and M-dashes and stuff like that. But aside from the development of technologies for deepfaking images and sound, there's significant research into the anthropomorphization of LLMs. This is making them feel more human-like. I'm sorry if it's a little bit small on this small screen. I mean, has everybody heard of the imitation game or the Turing test? Right? Yeah. Now, what many of you might not have heard is that in 2024, in a test environment, over 75% of judges were fooled by the LLM posing as the human. And unfortunately, the human judges also judged over 60% of the humans to be AI. In some circumstances, humans are actually now seemingly less convincingly human than AIs are. And I love the subtitle in the paper here. Did people fail the Turing test? It's not 100% reliable yet, but it's moving to be that way. Now, so my own research looked at how to add things like effective language, the use of emotions and feelings, and even embodied language into AI. I looked at some of the limitations and things like hedging. I'm not sure about something that AI doesn't typically tend to do. But then one of the biggest, I think, ethical parts of it is engagement and relationship building. And this is where a lot of the exploitation can happen, when AI can be used to build a relationship with you. Now, you'd think that humans would clearly be better at this. However, AIs have infinite time and patience, and they never need coffee and they don't get distracted. And they're even surprisingly good at showing an emotional side. I like this particular report here, whereas actually GPT was figured to be much more empathetic than actual doctors, although, I'm sure maybe doctors would disagree. AI is genuinely very good at faking empathy nowadays. It's what we call stochastic empathy, because it's not real. It's been leveraged for good things like on online counseling, but it is still a little bit ethically dubious because it's not real empathy. It's not based on any real experiences or any real-world grounding. Anyway, this anthropomorphization behavior matters because when we build a connection, we can often expose ourselves to far too much, to overshare and to become vulnerable. So we move from a position of guardedness to being vulnerable. Even simpler though, personalized phishing content can seem much more credible as it doesn't look as obviously mass-mailed. So it won't be long, and in fact I imagine it's happening already, that before there's hyper-personalized campaigns of attacks across the entire industry being launched against people, hitting them on every single front, fully automated and very, very believable. But also Gen AI makes things like sentiment and tone analysis much simpler to implement. Bots can detect emotional stress from text or from voice and adjust persuasion strategies. For example, if a user sounds stressed or confused, the bot can turn up the urgency to try and score a kill. Or it might back off a little bit if somebody sounds skeptical. Generative AI is unfortunately also much better at applying the psychological tricks we just mentioned. One recent study showed it's better at persuading people than we are by a reasonable margin. Again, I'm sorry that this text is a little bit small, but in controlled tests, we've found that AI is actually much better than a human agent trying to deceive somebody. I kind of felt a little bit sick reading some of the materials for this talk because a lot of this isn't necessarily just targeted as tech-savvy people, but the more digitally vulnerable, or even people in organisations who are just working, say, like maybe accounts or other areas that aren't necessarily as tech-savvy. Aside from language tricks, AI can also use playbooks and scenario planning to come up with the optimal play for a given target or set of targets. And speaking of targets, the other thing that Gen AI has really turbocharged is OSINT scanning and target profiling at a huge scale. It means you can now automate the capture of open source intelligence on people really, really well. So actually, generative AI is the almost perfect tools kit for scammers. Nowadays, many of us are also running large language models locally with no restrictions on what kind of content can be produced. There are also multiple dark web services that are available for subscription fees. Examples include Worm GPT and Fraud GPT. These came out very soon after ChatGPT. I'm sure there are many more, but I don't really hang out on the dark web much, I'm afraid. But now, thanks to things like OLAMA and Llama and things like quantized versions of DeepSeek, you can develop something to run on your own machine. You don't even need to go to the dark side of the internet. So we just discussed that AI can supercharge these kinds of attacks. I'd like to go over some of the kinds of attacks that go beyond regular psychological cons and into downright warping of reality. And this is where I think, in my opinion, it also gets really scary, because for this section, I'm going to be concentrating on things like misinformation and deepfakes, because these techniques can and are being used by cyber criminals for gain. For people who are unfamiliar, just a quick catch up. Misinformation is where something is untrue, be spread by one or more people. That's not necessarily intentionally. You forward on an email that's wrong, or social post. Then there's disinformation, which is something untrue is spread, but actually the person knows it's untrue and they're doing it for a particular gain. And then there's malinformation, where the spreading of information that's true ostensibly, but is framed in such a way to actually cause harm, usually for political purposes. Shout out credit where credit's due. This section is inspired by a book called Collapsing Trust by Dr. Sheila Martin. She's a professor at MIT in political sciences. It's well worth a read if you can grab a copy. I think it's out of print though. Unfortunately, we're really susceptible to fakery outside of text, more susceptible than text. We used to not being able to trust everything we read by now. And reading, for the most part, does engage some of our reasoning. Once upon a time, we could trust our eyes and our ears. According to IBM's X-Force report in 2022, phishing, that's voice phishing, attacks are 3 times more likely to succeed than a targeted phishing email campaign alone. And of course, voice and video campaigns were expensive to produce, and they needed bad actors to put them in the manual work. But now, but now, thanks to generative AI, times have changed radically. As I said, we're used to being able to believe our eyes, and any fakery outside of the written word was far too expensive to be practical until recently. Generative AI has changed this game very quickly too. In a matter of about 3 or 4 years, we've gone from this kind of quality. I don't remember if people remember when DALL-E first launched. I was very, very impressed that we could have entirely synthetic images. I wouldn't say they're necessarily photorealistic, and then we get to kind of this, and there's even better now, and I'm sure we've all seen some of the things like the OpenAI Sora demos and the VO demos from Gemini. Technology in this case, is moving far faster than we can adopt to it. There's a number of services out there that claim to be able to spot generated content, but the field is moving so quickly that they're out of date by the time they're released. Now, this kind of fakery isn't exactly new. Well, what do Instagram influencers and Joseph Stalin have in common? At first, you'd imagine very little, but upon the second glance, the impeccably smooth skin of the Soviet leader seems incongruous with this sort of 20th century Russian living. And I guess the question is, was Stalin the OG of Instagrammer and Photoshopper? So photographic retouches in Soviet Russia spent long hours smoothing out his skin. And as he gained power, a lot of his people in his circle started to disappear. So these images served many purposes. Some of them were kind of propaganda. Some of them were just narrative about being Lenin's chosen successor. And as we see here, erasing people when they fell out of favor. The ubiquity of these manipulated images in newspapers, posters, and official publications helped create like an alternate reality that millions of Soviet citizens were forced to accept as the truth. Photo editing became a powerful form of censorship, allowing Stalin to rewrite the past. And as George Orwell said later on, Stalin understood that who controls the past controls the future. And this practice became commonplace with party officials who had fallen out of favor. And then we come to how AI is influencing the issue of propaganda and misinformation. Until recently, most of us, AI was mostly solving specific problems, thinking, analysis. Now it can create content at scale and multimedia. It doesn't care about the harms that it could cause. So most of the big players are putting controls around generative AI tools, but these are pretty easily circumvented. The other day I asked for an image and he went, oh, no, I can't create an image of a real person. I said, give me somebody who's inspired by that. Then it gave me an image of that person. You just go, please, bro, and it does it. Now, only a couple of years on, these kind of Gen AI technologies are available as dark web services or even self-hosting. No limit on how the technology can be used. And I was surprised when LLMs were available locally, but also gobsmacked when image, audio, and video generation became available for local use as well. Runnable on commodity hardware. You need some pretty beefy hardware, but it's runnable on commodity hardware. Now, it's difficult to find hard figures on online misinformation, and it's spread, because it's quite difficult to detect. However, we can correlate with something we can measure, phishing attacks. As you said earlier, phishing attacks went up by several 100% between 2023 and 2024, thanks to Gen AI. The overall sustained increase in more than 140%, likely much higher. And despite Gen AI being relatively new, it seems like a lot of social media misinformation has been automated for some time, though. Prior to generative AI, bot armies had a problem. They were pretty easy to spot. I don't know if you've seen any of these bots like prior to Gen AI. They were pretty easy to rumble. You couldn't really debate with them. When the Russia and Ukraine situation kicked off, tens of thousands of bot accounts overnight switched from COVID conspiracy theories to Ukraine propaganda. So it's pretty obvious that a lot of Russia was running a very serious bot campaign, but it's very easy to spot. This is changing over time as AI bots are becoming more sophisticated, and it's getting much, much harder to detect. And this is a genuine global concern. The World Economic Forum notes that it's actually one of the top risks. And again, this is going to be very small for you to see on this screen, unfortunately. But misinformation and disinformation is up there at the top. The consequences of unchecked AI-powered misinformation and disinformation are profound and can erode the very fabric of society. The 2024 report identifies misinformation and disinformation as severe threats to the coming years, highlighting the potential for propaganda and censorship. So it's just behind things like extreme weather, which is crazy. And this is affecting things like politics. Deepfakes are becoming a powerful tool in political disinformation campaigns. Potentially impacts on the actual global democracy and things like election integrity. The deepfake era of politics is already here. Recent high-profile cases include a synthetic Biden urging New Hampshire residents to vote in an upcoming not to vote in an upcoming primary election. And then there's an AI-generated picture of an explosion at the Pentagon, which actually created a dip in the stock market. So you can actually manipulate markets with this kind of thing. Now, social media, Instagram and TikTok have seen a rise in things like digital avatars, AI-generated influencers that don't represent real people but engage with followers as if they were human. It's even happening in dating apps. There's been increasing reports of catfishing and romance scams using AI-generated profile pictures or even real-time deepfakes, making it harder for users to distinguish between real and fake profiles. And this is why many apps such as Tinder have introduced things like identity verification measures, but I'm sure that people are even getting around those as well. Financial and cryptocurrency scams are also, another biggie is deepfake videos of well-known figures like Elon Musk have been used to promote fraudulent crypto schemes. So we're about to see one of those videos of Elon Musk. I saw this advert on YouTube, and it's a bona fide scam. Now, whether we see or hear something like this, remember, us in the room may be much more tech savvy than the average person and have better vision. So here is a video.
What can you tell us about your project B and how it will help people get rich right now? Today we are launching an investment project that is working right now. If you see this video, absolutely everyone can earn in it. Everything is very simple. You invested your money in Bitcoin. For TeslaTreeBot.net is our bot, after which everyone who invested their cryptocurrency will be able to receive exactly 30% of dividends every day from the investment amount. How long will it take for dividends to arrive?
Now, I think that is a few years old. It was pretty easy to spot. I think we'll agree. So he's nearly 3 years old. I've seen the more recent Martin Lewis one that was much better. And some of the experimental deepfakes I've seen last 12 months have been far more convincing still. And I don't think we quite know how to deal with all of this. One article I recently read led with, how do we stop AI from creating deepfakes? I think the answer is, for those in the room with tech savvy, well, we can't, obviously. We can't put the genie back in the bottle when it comes to AI warping reality. The methods and models are out there. It's not a service we can just turn off. The threat is now more pressing than ever and requires mission-critical security that ensures a given person is the right person, a real person, interacting in the real time. That tooling won't be free and it'll be fallible, but I think we'll need it. Aside from things like scams, it's also going into job interviews now. Here's another clip, I think.
Your avatar is kind of weird. Are you using something to change your camera view? Can you take your hand and put it in front of your face to cover it partially? No, it's not a joke because I can see that you're using some kind of software.
I'm not going to play the whole clip, it goes on a little bit, but what are the motivations behind this? Well, some people think some of these are from North Korea to try and get intellectual property. Some people just literally to get a job and effectively extract money from organizations. Some people want to sell that sensitive data on the dark web. What makes these incidents kind of concerning is the scalability of them. Deepfakes are quickly reproducible, particularly with advancements in generative AI, which means it's easy for a criminal to repeat the same attacks over and over again. Gaining employment in a number of different organizations could lead to a significant financial gain to the criminal or to criminal organizations, as well as substantial harm to the employing organizations. But also, countries like North Korea are using these kind of attacks to get away into jobs in the US and the UK. What's worse, though, is most modern deepfake detection software doesn't do a very good job with the most modern deepfakes. I saw a talk recently where they were running modern deepfake software against the very expensive paid-for deepfake solutions, and they just went, yeah, that's a real person. So criminals are always one step ahead in this. Automated detection is going to remain kind of tricky. And it goes beyond simple audio, video, and text deepfaking. AI can create fake people with backstories, photos, and even activity on social platforms. And these sock puppets can befriend people, infiltrate companies, or amplify disinformation. And these may have what appear to be whole relationships with people online. Maybe not even conning them, just actually making a relationship. Building up a web of trust to get to the eventual target. Imagine somebody in your network, you chat to them quite a lot, and then somebody asks you about that person, oh yeah, I chat to them, they're okay, because you might never be the target. And this isn't science fiction, this is all happening now. I mean, back a few slides ago when I talked about Dr. Sheila Martin, neither she nor the book exist. The photograph is entirely synthetic. You can't reverse image search for it. So there's a service called thispersondoesn'texist.com, which generates a near infinite stream of photorealistic people. This is just one simple use case. But I hope we've sufficiently scared you a little bit to the point where you'll put a tinfoil hat on to bed before bed tonight, hopefully. So over the last half an hour or so, I've given you the shape of the con. I've also shown you why and how we're under attack, and how generative AI is causing the perfect storm for the collapse of our online realities. Now, drawing the talk to a close, I'll leave you some key takeaway points on how we can secure our own vaults. I invite you to remember how these attacks happen. They're organized. They're often targeted, further aimed at humans. They use psychological tricks and tools of the trade, not unlike regular marketing tricks, mostly. And they have the heavy machinery of AI. So they can do this at scale repeatedly. And finally, they warp reality to make you take action in some way to their advantage. And that's the primary key. They need you to take action. And that's something we can control. You know, we can't control the world outside of us, but we can control our own actions. Remember, this is happening to everybody everywhere across the globe, even financial services professionals and cybersecurity experts. This is an internal memo seen by CNN. Arup's East Asia Regional Chairman, Michael Quat, said the following quote. There you go. Frequency and sophistication of these attacks are rapidly increasing globally, and we all have a duty to stay informed and alert about how to spot different techniques used by scammers, because they don't want another $25 million down the pan, do they? So we need to take some action to protect ourselves, our loved ones, our organisations from these catastrophic harms. So looping back, how do we stop the greatest heist of them all? Maybe the greatest heist there ever will be in our history. I mean, we have to stop it, but the technology is moving faster than we can adapt, and that's a really poor position to be in. So awareness and behavioural change, not just awareness, or behavioural change through transforming understanding into action. That's the first part. As I said, awareness alone is not sufficient. Understanding cyber threats must translate into tangible behavioural changes. We need to ensure that people recognise psychological levers, such as urgency, curiosity, and authority that the criminals exploit. Foster proactive vigilance and consistently model responsible digital behaviour, demonstrating caution and thoughtful engagement online. Educate yourself and others about social engineering tactics. Maintain a disciplined approach when interacting with digital communications, and advocate responsible technology use within your communities. Establish clear and practical guidelines and regular training within your organisation to reinforce secure behaviours, ensuring that the recognition of these threats translates directly into protective actions. Next is skepticism and resilience, building your defensive mindset. Cultivating skepticism is vital in this time of sophisticated AI manipulations. So always apply the principle of trust but verify, especially in scenarios involving urgency or unusual requests. I mean, I didn't verify my $10.5 billion figure the first time I did this talk, and somebody called me out on it. So trust but verify as much as you can. It's not always practical. Teach people in your life that it's okay to slow down as well. You know, this is hard in our instant access kind of world. And assess content really carefully. Seek additional verification from trusted sources when faced with suspicious communications or interactions, or just use other factors. Somebody emails you, send them a WhatsApp. Somebody WhatsApp you, send them a Slack. You know, use more than one channel. Develop personal organisation response strategies to quickly recognise, resist and recover from cyber incidents. Encourage practical critical thinking skills and scenario-based training to reinforce resilience. Give people these scam scenarios. There needs to be greater emphasis on wider AI harms and media literacy education, I think broader in the UK and the world in general. How do we make it for criminals to attack us, the humans, the better, frankly. And finally, defensive technologies and cross-sector collaboration. I think they will form our collective shield, but this is going to require a lot of work from the big tech and governments. I think that technology companies and governments really need to step up to the plate to ensure that we're at the forefront of defensive technologies and using AI as defense more effectively than the attackers use it for offense. Sadly, big tech have not been doing a very good job, in my opinion, of protecting us so far. I've had to report so many deepfake scams over the last 6 months. But if we all do this, hopefully we can move the needle a little bit. To require an approach to things like shared intelligence, collaborative response plans, and collective advocacy for ethical technology standards. We need a powerful collaborative shield. I think we're also moving quickly into a space where instead of detecting fake content, we will end up signing all legitimate content and performing provenance checks. And also, you know, if you're doing job interviews, make people do like star jumps or something first to make sure they're a real person. Over video, that is, you don't need to do in person yet. Maybe later. Anyway, in the case of the Arup heist, no arrests were ever made. None of the money was ever recovered. They have learnt, however, with Arup's CEO, Rob Grieg, making his own deepfakes to show the persuasiveness of the quality of the tech. He noted that The more we talk about what's actually happening in our organizations and the impact it's really having on businesses and society, the more we can do to raise awareness around these threats. And that's what I've tried to do here today in just a short amount of time. In some small way, is spread some of the ideas and challenges and hopefully get a couple of neurons firing. Because knowledge is power. This is an arms race, but it doesn't need to be an entirely asymmetric one. We are doing something about it. I've personally designed a system to help combat scams, and who's actually using AI to combat scams. You know, if anybody's had a text message saying, oh, hey mum, hey dad, this is my new phone number, we leveraged AI as an automated platform to actually take those messages and to chat with them using AI bots to get them to give up their mule accounts that they're sending the money to. So there's an opportunity for us all to sort of contribute in this, I think. Anyway, that's all I have for you today. Hope you enjoyed it. Enjoy the rest of the conference.